How's it going? This is our next essential question in American history. We're moving into the 1830s here, so we've sort of jumped around a little bit, but we're moving closer and closer to the Civil War, which is what we're going to end this course with. We're not coming back to school, so you're only going to see me in video form, basically. Just a reminder that if you have any issues with this, last week's lesson, whatever it is, you can come to my Zoom Q&A on Friday mornings, 9:30 to 11, and get help that way. If you're still struggling, come email me at james.gregory@lausd.net, and we'll get you all sorted out. I know times are tough, but we still want you to learn during this time, so it's the way it is. In terms of my hair, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm not cutting my own hair. I've seen people do that. Not happening. So our question this week that we're going to focus on asks us, was Nat Turner a hero or a madman? Now, we're going to go over who Nat Turner is in a little bit, but I want to examine that comparison. Hero or madman? So basically you're asking if somebody was noble and good, or were they crazy? This question is an age-old question that I don't think society has really answered. If we go back to the American Revolution, which you should have learned about, if you were a patriot fighting against the British and you burned a building, or you threw a rock into a window, if you destroyed property, if you did something terrible and you said, yeah, we hate the British, you would call yourself a patriot, and other people who thought like you would call you a patriot, a freedom fighter. But if you were a loyalist, if you were British, and you looked at that, you would call those exact same people terrorists. So, it's all about perspective. Whether Nat Turner was a hero or a madman comes down to perspective too. Nat Turner was a former slave, and he's going to lead a slave uprising, and when he does that, he's going to kill people to sort of free all the slaves. And the question you really have to ask yourself before we get into this is slavery such a bad thing, such an evil thing, that it's worth killing people to end it? That's what you've really got to ponder here. If you think slavery is so bad and the only way to end it is by killing people, then you think Nat Turner probably wasn't crazy. You probably think he was a hero. But if you think, nah, listen, you can't be killing people just because you want to end slavery, then you probably think Nat Turner's a madman. So it ultimately comes down to your perspective. Sorry, I just blew up into the screen, just adjusting my chair. It ultimately comes down to your perspective. So let's explore what happens here, and you can tell me whether you think Nat Turner was a hero or a madman. Now, one other thing you should know is that Nat Turner is probably the most famous slave uprising in American history, but it's not the only one. There were several other, slave uprisings that happened in American history. His is probably the most famous because it was the deadliest at the time, and it led to a lot of changes, and we'll get into those changes a little bit later. So let's take a look at our timeline. If you take a look here at the timeline that I provided for you. So in 1619, we have the arrival of the first African slaves to the British colony of Virginia. Okay, so that's the beginning of white people in what would eventually become the United States, or the 13 colonies. 1800, a planned uprising among slaves in Richmond, Virginia, led by Gabriel Prosser, was stopped before it could take place. The individuals involved were executed. Gabriel Prosser is a really interesting person. Obviously, he himself was a former slave. He used the language of the Declaration of Independence to sort of point out how stubborn these slave owners were, but it doesn't end up working for him. October 2nd, 1800, Nat Turner was born in Southampton County, Virginia. Okay, so right when that other uprising is crushed and the people are executed, Nat Turner is born. 1822, authorities in Charleston, South Carolina, executed members of a group led by former slave Denmark Vesey, who were planning on a slave uprising. So Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, all these guys are trying to free the slaves themselves, by creating these uprisings, by fighting back. And these are just some examples of ones that ultimately failed, but they inspire the next one. Early 1820s. According to Turner, he received the first in a series of visions. Okay, interesting. 1822, Nat Turner was sold to Thomas More. 1828, Thomas More died, and Turner was inherited by his son, Putnam More. Okay, inherit means like something is passed down to you. So in this case, Thomas More died, so his son, Putnam More, inherits his slave, Nat Turner. 1830, Turner was sent to the home of Joseph Travis after Travis married Putnam's mother. August 22nd, 1831, Turner and a group of slaves initiated an armed uprising against the white slaveholders of Southampton County, Virginia. Okay, so now we're in the actual action of the uprising. They start an armed uprising. What that means is they got guns, they got weapons, they got pitchforks, and they said, we're fighting back. We're using violence to end slavery. The next day, August 23rd, 1831, Turner's group scattered after killing approximately 55 white men, women, and children. Turner went into hiding, and state officials issued a reward for his capture. Okay, so he kills 55 white men, women, and children, roughly. And he goes into hiding. He's in the wind. They don't know where he is. They're looking for him. Go to October 30th, 1831. After 70 days in hiding, Turner was captured and imprisoned in the Southampton County Jail in Jerusalem, Virginia, to await trial. So he's gone for 70 days. November 1st to 4th, 1831, so just a few days later, local lawyer and slaveholder Thomas R. Gray visited and questioned Turner. He compiled the Confessions of Nat Turner, which was published following Turner's trial. Okay, so this guy Gray actually visits him, questions him, writes down what he said. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when you're taking notes in class, when I've done it too, sometimes I struggle to write down everything somebody says. I usually write an annotation. This guy Thomas Gray literally wrote down everything Turner said, or he was supposed to. So let's see what that looks like. That's one of the things we're going to read. November 5th, 1831. At his trial, Turner was found guilty of insurgency and sentenced to death. Okay. November 11th, 1831, Turner was hung at noon. March 15th, 1832, the legislature of Virginia passed a new law that placed further restrictions on the rights of free black citizens and slaves. So as I said to you before, Turner's uprising is the most deadly at the time, and it leads a bunch of these slaveholding states to pass more strict laws against slaves and free blacks. And one of the things they're going to do is they're going to clamp down on whether slaves could read or write. And a lot of slave owners wanted their slaves to read and write initially because they would, the slave might read to them, or they might need to go to town and read signs and things like that. But with Nat Turner's rebellion here, his uprising, a lot of lawmakers are going to say, don't let them read, because if you let them read, they'll read books and they'll get ideas, and one of their ideas might be getting their freedom, which is a great point to say that knowledge and education is power, and that's why you should never, ever diss school or dismiss school or ignore school or any education of that kind. The more you know, the more powerful you are. Nat Turner knew that. Nat Turner could read and write. And so I'm not comparing, your life to necessarily that of a slave, but what I am saying is that don't forget how important education is. It was so important that slave owners wanted to make sure slaves got no education, because they knew if they had education, they would use that to break free. So just don't ever forget that. All right. So let's move on to some documents here. We've got document A, the Confessions of Nat Turner. Lawyer Thomas R. Gray visited Nat Turner in jail on October 30th, 1831, based on his conversations with Turner. Gray wrote this document for Turner's trial. Okay, remember before how I said Gray supposedly wrote down everything Turner said. This says it's based on his conversations. So Gray maybe wasn't writing as Turner was talking. He might have just processed it and then wrote it later. Well, that's not super accurate because everyone has biases. And if Gray is hearing this and is thinking, this Turner guy, he's crazy, well, then Turner's going to sound crazy on the page. You know, if he's listening to it and he thinks, oh, wow, this guy sounds great, then he's going to make him sound great. So you've got to keep that in mind, that this is not Turner word for word, or at least, I don't know how they would do that in those days. You'll notice reporters, anytime they're at a press conference or they're interviewing somebody, they have a tape recorder or something that they can hold up and listen to it later. They didn't have that in those days. All right, so let's see what they wrote. Oh, and by the way, this is the day I think he was put in jail. So keep that in mind. He hasn't been convicted yet. He's just been put in jail. Thomas R. Gray. The public has tried to understand the origin of this dreadful conspiracy and the motives which influenced its diabolical actors. I like that word, diabolical. It means evil or devilish. Saying that the people who do these acts, not actors like in a play, but the people who do these acts are evil and devilish. Okay. Everything connected with this sad affair was wrapped in mystery, until Nat Turner, the leader of this ferocious band, was captured. I decided to commit his statements to writing and publish them with little or no change from his own words. Okay, so he says that, but how much can we trust that this is little or no change from his own words? He could say that and then change everything, Turner said. Now, he probably didn't do that because, how often do you think to yourself, I'm going to lie? But on the other hand, it's possible, and if he doesn't like Turner, he calls him the leader of a ferocious band. Sounds like he doesn't like him. So I'm not going to bank on the idea that he's going to make Turner sound good. So just keep that in mind. Let's see what Turner says. Nathaniel Turner. My mother and others said I surely would be a prophet, as the Lord had shown me things that happened before my birth. All right, a prophet is a person considered to be a messenger of God. So keep that in mind. Someone who can take the message of God and spread that to people, usually can see into the future. Okay? And my father and mother said I was intended for some great purpose. My mother, who was very religious, my master, who belonged to the church, and other religious persons noticed my unique manners and my uncommon intelligence, and remarked I would never be of any service to anyone as a slave. So that's interesting. Turner is saying, I know that I'm smarter than most people. I'm not supposed to be a slave. My parents told me I was special. Join the club. But, the idea being that, I'm not meant for this. I was meant for something more. Okay. Thomas R. Gray. Nat Turner is a complete fanatic. All right, a fanatic is a person with an extreme dedication or belief. It's usually meant to be bad, but now fanatic we kind of use a little differently. If you're a fan of the Mets, that comes from fanatic. If you're a fan of the Dodgers or whatever, that comes from fanatic. But fanatic doesn't mean you're crazy anymore, but it did at that time. It might still in the dictionary, but people don't really use it that way. Okay, so Nat Turner is a complete fanatic. He possesses an uncommon share of intelligence with a mind capable of attaining anything, but it is warped and perverted by the influence of early experiences. So in other words, they're saying Turner's smart, but his values and his goals are warped, sort of changed, and perverted, which means corrupted, towards bad things. Okay, so perverted and warped, it means it's been changed and corrupted to think a certain way. So basically Gray is saying this guy's smart, but he doesn't use his abilities for good. The calm, deliberate composure with which he spoke of his actions, the expression of his fiend-like face when excited by enthusiasm, still bearing the stains of the blood of helpless innocence, I looked at him and my blood curdled in my veins. Okay, a fiend is like an evil person or an evil spirit or an evil demon. He says, my blood curdled in my veins, meaning it went bad in my veins. It spoiled. He hates Turner. This guy, Gray, he absolutely hates Turner. And what's interesting is he talks more about, like, not just what he said, but how he said it. Like, Turner spoke with a calm, deliberate tone after just killing 55 people. And I think, yeah, that sounds a little bit psychotic, but you have to remember Turner is, and I assume most psychopaths would think that they're not crazy, that they're doing the right thing. I mean, no crazy person ever thinks they're crazy, right? But again, it all comes back to the thing I said at the beginning. Was he a hero or a madman? It depends on how bad you think slavery is. Thomas Gray clearly doesn't think slavery is that bad because he's like, how could he do this? But if you think slavery is really bad, you might say, well, now at least you're paying attention. Now at least you're thinking about, maybe changing slavery, if not ending it. The opposite happens, though. They're going to buckle down. They're going to make it harder for slaves to do things like this. Gray clearly feels that the people that Turner killed were innocent. And in the eyes of Turner and the people in his rebellion, none of those people are innocent because they're perpetuating slavery. Now, women and children, I don't know. Were they caught in the crossfire? Are the children of slave owners innocent? Let's move on to document B, the Richmond Enquirer. The following is an excerpt from a letter written to the editor of the Richmond Enquirer. And if you go to the bottom, this is from September 27th, 1831. The reason I say go to the bottom and look at the date is because Turner's not captured for about another month. Don't forget, on our timeline, he was captured on October 30th. So this is while Turner is in hiding. He's done the deed, he's killed those people, but they haven't caught him yet. So keep that in mind while you're reading this document. We have as yet no sufficient reason to believe that there was a concert or general plan among the blacks. I have no doubt, however, that the subject has been pretty generally discussed among them, and the minds of many cooperated in the design. So that's interesting. The person writing to this newspaper is saying, well, we don't know if all black people were... I like that. There was a concert or general plan. Concert doesn't just mean like there's music going on. It means like there's an agreement when things work in concert. But he's saying slaves have definitely been planning this for a while. Nat Turner just went ahead and did it. I don't know if you can totally say that because history shows us that there were a lot of slaves who didn't want to fight back for their freedom. It doesn't mean they didn't want to be free. They just understood that if they fought for their freedom, they were risking their lives. And they were not happy to do the work, but they wanted to have their lives. So not every slave is going to jump on this bandwagon. So I think it's a little harsh for him to say that. Let's keep reading. I am led to believe, from all that I can learn, that Nat Turner has been revolving this plan of mischief and disruption for years. Now, revolving literally means like moving in a circle, but what he's really saying is like this plan has been revolving or spinning around in his head for years. Like he didn't just plan this the day of or the night before. He's been thinking about doing this for a long time. Keep reading. Pretending to be divinely inspired, more than 4 years ago, he announced to the blacks that he should baptize himself on a particular day. And while in the water, a dove would be seen to descend from heaven and perch on his head, thus endeavoring to collect a great crowd. Okay, guys, when he says pretending to be divinely inspired, divinely means related to God, like through God. So he's saying Nat Turner pretended to be an agent of God or pretended to be a prophet or pretended to speak to God, but he wasn't really. He's just playing pretend. And that in doing that, he was able to get so many people together to think in his way and follow him along. So he lied. He, at least according to this person, he says Nat Turner lied about speaking to God and all that stuff. It's not true. This assembly was prevented, but he, in company with a white man, did actually baptize himself. From that day until the awful tragedy of the 22nd, he has used every means in his power to acquire control over the minds of slaves. That's an interesting sentence. He says, ever since Nat Turner was baptized, he has been trying to get slaves to join him in ending slavery. Okay, I mean, yeah, again, if you think slavery is so bad that it's worth killing people to end, this isn't a bad thing. But again, this writer, probably a white man, thinks, how would you ever want to do that? That's terrible. So it all depends on perspective. A dreamer of dreams and a would-be prophet. Okay, so he's saying this guy's pie in the sky. He's got these crazy ideas. A would-be prophet. He's basically saying he's not a real prophet. He's pretending to be one. He's a fake. He's a fraud. He used all of the arts familiar to such pretenders to deceive, delude, and overawe their minds. All right, I like that. Deceive means like lie to or mislead. Delude means to deceive, which we just went over. And then overawe means overwhelm. So basically, they're saying this guy is a complete fake. Nat Turner just convinced a bunch of people to join him and be violent against slavery. So it sounds like Thomas Gray, who we read in the last document, thinks Nat Turner's a madman. And then whoever this writer is, they don't give a name, they say friend of the editor. Whoever's writing to this newspaper says Nat Turner's absolutely crazy, no question. He's just a liar. They all think he's crazy. The only person we've read so far who doesn't think Nat Turner's a madman is Nat Turner. Nat Turner says, I spoke to God. I knew I was here for some great purpose. I wasn't meant to be a slave. You know, I'm going to end slavery. He's the only one who doesn't think he's crazy so far. So document A and document B mostly say that he's crazy, with the exception being Nat Turner saying, I'm not crazy, I know what I'm doing, slavery is evil and it needs to end. Okay, let's look at our last document and then we can start to form an answer here. All right. Document C is an address to the slaves of the United States. The following is an excerpt of a speech delivered by the African-American abolitionist Henry Highland Garnett at the National Negro Convention in Buffalo, New York. The convention drew 70 delegates, including abolitionist leaders like Frederick Douglass. Okay, so this happens, if you go to the bottom, this is in 1843, where slavery still exists. It's before the Civil War, but Nat Turner has, his rebellion ended, 12 years before this? So Nat Turner's rebellion is a memory that some people might remember, but it's been over a decade. It's been over 10 years, 12 years. So I wonder what they're going to say here. So remember that this is Henry Highland Garnett, an African-American abolitionist. Now, that's important. Abolitionist means they want to abolish slavery, meaning get rid of slavery. So if you're an abolitionist, you want to abolish or get rid of slavery. He's African-American. I guess he's free. Doesn't say that, but he's an abolitionist, so let's see. Well, I guess if he's speaking at this convention, there's no way he's a slave. I mean, it's not like slaves were saying, hey, master, I'd like to go to this convention this weekend. Is that all right? And the master's saying, yeah, no problem. Of course, that's not going to happen. So he must be free if he's speaking at this. This is in Buffalo, New York. Let's see what he says. The time has come when you must act for yourselves. You can do the work of emancipation better than any others. Now, real quick, emancipation just means freedom from slavery. You can do the work of ending slavery better than any others. However much you and all of us may desire it, there is not much hope of redemption without the shedding of blood. If you must bleed, let it all come at once. Interesting. Now, redemption is a fascinating word. It means to be saved, to redeem. Now, he says there's not much hope of redemption without the shedding of blood. In other words, he says it in the first paragraph. Basically, you can't end slavery without shedding blood. So he does not think that slavery is above killing people. In other words, he thinks slavery is so bad that you need to kill people to end it. He says it. Keep reading. The patriotic Nathaniel Turner, patriotic, all right, was driven to desperation by wrong and injustice. His name has been recorded on the list of infamy, but future generations will remember him among the noble and brave. Now, infamy means you're known infamously for evil. You're famous for bad reasons. So he says Nat Turner's remembered in infamy, but he's actually noble and brave. He was actually good. All right. And he calls him patriotic, meaning, he really stood for American values, the values of this country. All men are created equal, right? Those who have fallen in freedom's conflict, their memories will be cherished in all future generations. Those who are living, their names surrounded by a halo of glory. Okay, keep reading. Strike for your lives and liberties. Now is the day and the hour. Let every slave throughout the land do this. And the days of slavery are numbered. You cannot be more oppressed than you have been. You cannot suffer greater cruelties than you have already. Rather die free men than live to be slaves. Remember that you are 4 million. So Garnett is saying things can't get worse for you as a slave. You might as well do what Turner did. Better to die free and fighting for your freedoms than live as a slave. There's 4 million of us, or of you. He's speaking to them. He's not a slave. That's really interesting. So he uses Turner as inspiration. He definitely doesn't see Turner as a madman. Keep reading. It's in your power to so torment the God-cursed slaveholders that they will be glad to let you go free. Let your motto be resistance, resistance, resistance. No oppressed people have ever secured their liberty without resistance. Okay, so he's saying bother these slave owners until they let you go. All right. And then he says no people who've been oppressed have ever secured their liberty without resistance. In other words, if you're a slave and you go to your master and you go, please let me be free, they're not going to do that. People don't do that out of the goodness of their heart. Now, there were some people who freed their slaves, at different points, but that was rare. That wasn't a common thing. Most people kept their slaves because these people were racist and they didn't like black people, and they liked that slaves were there to make money for them. So it was rare to give your slaves away. Garnett is saying, look, you want to end slavery? You can't just ask for it. You can't grovel and beg. You go get it. You have to resist. So when I look at all these documents, it's clear the two white people, Gray and the person who wrote into that newspaper in Document B, they think Nat Turner's a madman, that he killed innocent people, that he was planning this, that he was just a bad person whose mind was warped and perverted. But if you ask Garnett, if you ask Turner, no, slavery is an awful thing, and we can't wait on white people being nice to us to end it. It's not going to happen that way. So I want you to tell me, was Nat Turner a hero or a madman in about 14 to 20 sentences? Now, how are you going to fill that up? I'd like you to please use a quote from each of the three documents, A, B, and C. Even if you don't agree with Gray, or you don't agree with the person who wrote into B, or you don't agree with Garnett or Turner, just quote them anyway and explain it to give context to the reading. Now, why am I asking you to do that? I'm asking you to do that, because in high school and in college, one of the really important things you're going to have to be able to do is bring other people's point of view into your answer and then diffuse that. So you might say, Thomas Gray said this, but I disagree because, right? That only strengthens your argument. You don't just want to take the people who agree with you and pepper it in there. You want to take the people who disagree with you and deconstruct their arguments. So when Gray says he's a complete fanatic, right? You might say, yeah, Gray said he's a complete fanatic, but I don't necessarily think that's bad, or I disagree that he's a fanatic. I think he's trying to do the right thing, which is end slavery. That's a strong answer, and you're using evidence from the time period. So do that in about 14 to 20 sentences. Let's talk about maybe a starting sentence. Start off with, was Nat Turner a hero or a madman? Before you even get into Nat Turner, talk about what those two things are. A hero is somebody who does the right thing even though it's unpopular. A hero is somebody who sacrifices themselves for others. A hero is somebody who saves people. A madman is somebody who has crazy intentions or evil intentions and doesn't care about how that helps other people. You should start out early by telling the reader This is what a hero is. This is what a madman is. And then you can either tell me right there, this is what I think Nat Turner is and here's why, or you can lay out the argument and then at the end tell me what you think. I'm cool with either way. I'm giving you some flexibility here. Use quotes from the documents and you'll be good. Do not, please, do not go on Google, type in Nat Turner, and just copy and paste stuff because I'm going to send it right back to you. A lot of you have not been doing that. You've been writing your own stuff. That's the point. I want you to think about it and tell me what you think. Just going on Google and copying and pasting, I can't accept that because it's not your work. It's basically cheating. But it's not even good cheating because a lot of you just put a whole bunch of details about Nat Turner and you don't answer the question. Just think about it. Just think about it. And don't worry about being right. Just tell me what you think. And then I'll grade you. And if I say, hey, listen, you can do more here or there, do that, and then you'll get a better grade. So I'm looking forward to reading your answers. Some of your answers have been really great. Remember, hero or madman comes down to if you think slavery is evil enough that it's worth killing people to end it, at least in Turner's situation. All right? Once you can answer that, you can give me an answer to this, and I look forward to reading it.